Once the decision has been made to do an overhaul, it no longer matters what application the engine was used in or what you suspect the cause of the failure may have been. The procedures for the overhaul are essentially the same for any Kubota engine. The proper sequence of those steps and your attention to detail are all that matters. From this point forward, you should use this program as if you're working along with our technician to overhaul the engine and find the reason for the failure. Before beginning disassembly of the engine, you must remove the fluids. Drain the engine oil and coolant. Save clean samples of both for later analysis. Next, disconnect the battery at the negative terminal. You must also disconnect the electrical circuits and label the important connectors to make reassembly easier. There may be a number of parts or accessories that must be removed before you can get the engine out of the product. Check your manuals for these procedures. When that is done, remove the engine from the product and mount it to the engine stand. Review the recommended order of disassembly and reassembly in the workshop manual. The next step is to mark an F on the front side of the fan to help in reassembly. Leaving some tension on the alternator and belt will make it easier to remove the fan. Remove the muffler and exhaust manifold. Next, remove the drive pulley and alternator. The injection lines also have to come off. Cap the openings to prevent contamination. Then remove the overflow lines. When you remove the injection lines on other Kubota engines, be sure not to loosen the delivery valves at the injection pump. You may need to use 2 wrenches, or a wrench and a special tool like this. Remove the nozzle holder assemblies using this special tool. Place the nozzles in clean diesel fuel, but be careful not to damage the pentals. Also, remove the copper gaskets on the seats of the cylinder head. Take the valve cover off and inspect the gasket. Loosen the rocker arm bolts a few turns each in sequence until all tension is removed. Then remove the rocker arm. Take out the push rods and valve caps. Place them in order in a cardboard box with holes marked like this. Remove the water return pipe and hose at the thermostat housing. The glow plugs, then the intake manifold. Using the recommended sequence from the manual, loosen the head bolts 1 turn at a time until all bolts are loose. Then pull the head bolts and the cylinder head. Note the condition of the head gasket. You may also find a shim on the cylinder head side of the gasket. Be careful, the shim has sharp edges. By the way, don't try to pry the head off with a sharp tool. It can cause damage to the head and the block. With the cylinder head removed, you'll notice a special blue O-ring on the engine. This O-ring is used to seal the water jacket from the oil pressure galley. This is a special O-ring and should always be replaced with the correct part number. If it's replaced with the incorrect part, you'll see water in the oil. Remove and mark each lifter in the proper sequence. You'll replace them later in the same holes they came from. Next, you must take out the thermostat, then the valves. Place them in order on the table. This unit is equipped with a fuel lift pump. It must be removed also. Install a shop-made flywheel stopper and remove the crankshaft nut from the drive pulley. There are timing marks on the crankshaft and the vibration dampener. Once these steps are completed, you may remove the flywheel stopper. If timing marks are present, you'll need to use them when reassembling the engine. Some engines have a keyed shaft and no timing marks. The next parts to come off are the hour meter drive and the water pump. When that's done, pull the bolts from the front gear case cover. The bolts are different lengths, so note where they come from. When you remove the gear case, the crankshaft collar can come off with it. On other Kubota diesel models, you'll need to first remove the speed control plate, disconnect the governor springs, and remove the start spring attached to the front cover of the engine. If you try to remove the front cover without removing the start spring, you could stretch it out of shape. A stretched spring will have to be replaced or the unit will not start again. Do not remove the cap on the fuel limit screw or the fuel limit screw itself. It could cause the factory fuel setting to be altered. It could cause overfueling, excessive smoke, or engine overheating. Now, if you find the cap has been removed, it's a sure sign someone has tampered with the setting. That could be the cause of failure and would void the factory warranty. If for any reason the gear case is damaged and it must be replaced, please consult the reference manual for information regarding the proper procedure. The engine oil pump is located on the front case of the Super 5 Series engines. On other Kubota engines, the oil pump is located on the engine block. You'll need to remove the engine stop solenoid if there is one. It's not used on all applications and when equipped may be a different brand or in a different location. Remove the speed control plate and governor springs. Be careful to note how the spring is connected. When working on other engine models, note the number of springs, their location, and where they're connected. In some applications, you'll find one spring. In others, there are two. Align the control rack pin with the notch on the crankcase and remove the injection pump. Do not pry the pump off with a sharp tool. Count the number of shims. Be careful, they have sharp edges. If the control rack and notch are not lined up, the injection pump cannot be removed without damage to the pump and or the block. If the pump rack is frozen due to contamination, like this one, prying it off will bend the rack pin. If the pump is stuck, remove the side cover, the throttle plate, or the idle dampener screw and tap the pin into alignment with a punch. Next, remove the fuel camshaft stopper, then the camshaft. If the gear isn't damaged, you don't need to take it off the camshaft. The governor shaft is next. First, remove the snap ring from the rear of the shaft, then the idler gear, and the shaft is free. On other Kubota models, you may find the governor assembly attached to the fuel camshaft. The governor doesn't normally need to be disassembled unless you find damage. The start spring must come off, then the shaft cover, the fork lever shaft and spacer, the bearing, and fork levers. Remove all the other gears on the front gear case side of the engine. Pull this snap ring and the idler gear will come off. Take out the camshaft stopper bolts and remove the camshaft. Next, remove the collar and O-ring. On other Kubota models, you'll find the following differences. You'll need to remove the oil pump. First, remove the flange nut, then the oil pump gear, then the bolts holding the pump. On the crankshaft, remove the spacer, the O-ring, and the oil slinger. Then, using a puller, remove the crankshaft idle gear. This oil slinger is not on the Super 5 Series engines. The carbon ridge must be removed from each cylinder bore using a good carbon cleaner. Apply the carbon cleaner, carburetor cleaner will work, and let it soften the material for a while. Then use a ridge reamer to remove it. With the help of another technician, rotate the engine on the stand. Then remove the oil pan, the oil strainer, and its O-ring. On some models there are 2 bolt holes marked 2 and 3 for 2-cylinder and 3-cylinder. Make certain you use the correct hole. After turning the crankshaft to allow each piston in sequence to be at bottom dead center, remove the rod bolts and rod caps. Using a round piece of hardwood, gently drive out each piston and rod assembly. Note the position of the rod caps. All Kubota engines have numbers on the connecting rod caps and rod. These numbers always match up and face the injection pump side of the engine. Number each assembly 1, 2, and 3 from the gear case side of the engine. You should also mark the piston with an arrow toward the front to show the correct placement. The rings have to come out next using this special tool. Look for signs of stuck rings, which could result from sludge in the oil. Now, remove the snap rings and the piston pins from each assembly and lay them out in sequence. After removing the starter, get the help of another technician and rotate the engine to allow the flywheel to face up. Then lock the flywheel in position with the stopper and remove the flywheel bolts. Take off the stopper and remove the flywheel. Remember, some flywheels on diesel engines are quite heavy, so get help to remove them. Rotate the engine on the stand and check the crankshaft end play with a dial indicator. Record the measurement, then remove all the bolts on the rear cover. Place 2 of the bolts in the special threaded holes and use them to remove the cover. Do not try to pry it off with a sharp tool. Next, remove all the bearing case bolt 2s from the oil pan side and carefully remove the crankshaft from the block. On other models of Kubota engines, the crankshaft gear will have to be removed before the crank can be removed, or serious damage to the bearing will occur. Finally, remove the main bearing case assemblies from the crankshaft and mark each to show its position. The engine is now completely disassembled. Before going on to the next segment, I suggest you study the workshop and reference manuals for inspection procedures and specifications for your engine. When you're ready, push play to go on to the inspection segment.